and gentlemen, welcome back to the World SD-WAN and SASE Summit. And right now we're on our panel discussion on outlining possible pathways for SD-WAN evolution. We're looking at talking about building business successful SD infrastructure, comparing SD-WAN performance to expectations, evaluating the biggest pitfalls in your network operations after adopting SD-WAN, adopting SD-WAN to the latest technologies, sharing the best practices of seamless conversion, building blocks for convergence of network and security, and how does SD-WAN improve IoT security? Well, for this, we're joined by our eminent panelists. First up, Gabriel David, LCC Group Information Officer, Philippines. Gabriel is a well-seasoned head of information technology with over 20 years of experience working with different industries such as retail, health, medical, transportation, and logistics. Thank you so much, Gabriel, for joining us today and giving us your valuable time. Well, after this, we're requesting Vikram Dua to now join us on the screen. Vikram Dua, Senior Director, Philips India Limited, Head of Enterprise IT Security. Vikram is a strategic, visionary, and accomplished IT security leader with over 20 years of experience in diverse technologies, services, and geographies. He's demonstrated proven effectiveness in building consensus, partnering with senior business leaders, and working collaboratively at all levels across different industries. Thank you so much, Vikram, for joining us today.
Thank you, Bhavna.
And ladies and gentlemen, now joining us on the screen is Kuldeep Goyal, Apollo Tyres Head of Global IT Infrastructure and Cybersecurity, India. Well, Vikram is, Kuldeep is a strategic and accomplished person. He's right now the head of the Global IT Infrastructure and Cybersecurity for Apollo Tyres in India, with a stellar record in his experience. With this, I just request Kuldeep also to join us on the screen. Thank you, Kuldeep, for giving us your valuable time.
Thanks, Bhavna. Thank you.
And ladies and gentlemen, joining us as the moderator is Dr. Renne, Barcelona, the Director and Head of IT, Global University Systems, Philippines, joining us. Well, Renne is a part of senior level management team, mainly involved in project management, development, and implementation of strategic initiatives, assembling project teams, assigning individual responsibilities, providing direction to project management staffs, and establishing both short and long range goals. Thank you so much, Dr. Renne, for joining us today.
Thank you, Vivana.
So ladies and gentlemen, with this, you can have your panelists on the stage and screen. And if you may have any questions, please post it up in the Q&A tab. We'll take it up at the end of the session, if time allows. With this, Dr. Renne, the stage and screen is all yours to take it forth with your panel. Thank you so much.
Okay, so first of all, good morning to everyone. Good morning, good afternoon to everyone. Since the discussion, the topic today is about SD-WAN, or software-defined wide area network. Many corporations around the globe, it's pretty much obvious that many organizations or corporations around the globe started to adapt SD-WAN for their businesses in order for them to improve their technological performances, boost security, lowers complexity, and reduce costs, basically making our lives in the IT world easier. Its evolution became significant nowadays. I think let's discuss first the different pathways for the SD-WAN evolution. Let's talk about different thoughts and ideas on building successful SD infrastructure, and starting from planning up to deploying, up to biggest pitfalls in adapting SD-WAN. Allow me to call first Vikram about your thoughts in creating pathways for SD-WAN evolution.
Thanks, Dr. Renne. And first of all, I wanted to say that the thoughts conveyed here or spoken about here are my own and have no relevance to my company or any other companies which might be part of it. So that's a good question. I think SD-WAN, SD-LAN, all these have picked up a lot over the past few years. And it is looking at the future of networking as we go into the future. And a lot of remote offices should, considering the COVID scenario, be ready for the SD-WAN connectivity. The configuration of the network devices should be evaluated whether they can receive high number of SD-WAN traffic or not. I think generally what we have seen is that the traffic handling of traffic by these devices is a challenge. There's always a bottleneck. There's a throttle that happens. So a site survey is an important part to be conducted to check for readiness and specific requirements that have to be met to make sure that SD-WAN can be taken. It's just like any city deploying metros in their city. You know, before the metro comes in, they do the site evaluation, they do the site check and everything to make sure that the site can take metro before it comes in. Similarly, SD-WAN traffic has to follow the same rules. And organizations should also be flexible to choose any WAN transport based on the SLA, performance, cost benefits, business benefits, and there should be freedom to move from any provider to any provider. Generally, what we see is that people are locked down with their existing providers, and the existing provider might not be the best in class for SD-WAN. So that is where they should be able to move from provider to provider to be able to pick the best case for them. Also, we have to look at the IT architecture, because the IT architecture which we have right now may not be suitable for SD-WAN. So that is something which has also to be looked at to make sure it can be modified to support the platform needed for SD-WAN. We also need to do some do's and don'ts. There should be an inventory of your applications that just to ensure that the best performance and security required for the apps to function, especially the critical ones, is there, and SD-WAN will not bring the system down, the network down, and cause any disruption to business. And we need to either in-house or bring experts to do a deep packet inspection also, because most of the traffic, 99% of the traffic nowadays is encrypted. And any SD-WAN solution which we choose should be able to inspect this encrypted SSL-based traffic and quickly and efficiently, which is important, because if it's unable to do that, then the whole purpose of having a solution in place is gone. An SD-WAN should also be capable of centralizing the monitoring of data traversing through it. So while we're doing the SSL inspection, we should also have a handle over the data which is going through it, and have the capability, if required, for a self-heal, repair, monitoring, reporting, alerting, and things like that. And above all, a security consideration is important and should not be an afterthought. It should be security by design. Key requirements like encryption, network segmentation, firewalling, IPS, IDS, network access controls, etc., should be identified and incorporated in the architectural design for SD-WAN, and should not be, let's put SD-WAN first and then we will look at the rest of the stuff. That's basically going to be challenging, because we need to build the SD-WAN based on our requirements and not rebuild our existing infrastructure based on SD-WAN, which is reinventing the whole process. And above all, and lastly, you need to focus on the end user. User experience is primarily the most important part of any SD-WAN deployment. We need to ensure that the users are comfortable. The users have access to the networks, whichever they need, and the devices they use to do their business and deliver works seamlessly on the SD-WAN solution. But all said and done, the new technologies which are out there help us greatly from when SD-WAN started 3, 4, 5 years ago to now. Industry has evolved, and we have the easy to manage proven solutions in place.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you so much for that wonderful input, Vikram. What about you, Gabby? What are your thoughts about SD-WAN evolution?
Yeah, so basically, probably I'll explain this on my standpoint on why we actually chose SD-WAN as a solution. So, primarily the main reason for that one is to basically resolve most of the connectivity issues that we're currently experiencing in the organization. So we normally, technically in the Philippines, the traditional MPS are really, the technology in the Philippines are not really that advanced as well in terms of connectivity. Mm-hmm. So we decided to look for other technologies, but also at the same time, part of the strategy was that we could actually also cater to slowly migrate to the cloud as well, thus breaking down the traditional data centers and network connectivities. So we started evaluating SD-WAN technology and came to a point wherein we actually learned that these technologies can actually have multiple connections, can cater to multiple connections, thus replacing the traditional MPLS or the traditional network connection. And thus, we also learned that during that time that we would drastically reduce our operational expenses in terms of connectivities, because from a traditional MPLS, which would pay something like thousands of pesos, we would be able to replace this with broadbands or even what they call this data voice connections from the SIM cards of the telcos, right? So we started evaluating that, and we got positive response, no? So from some of our branches that we basically had, where we were using satellite-based connections for 256 kbps, and we were paying like 40,000 pesos, something like that. With the use of SD-WAN, we were able to reduce that to like 4,000 a month. So that's drastic. That's a huge drastic change in terms of operational expenses, right? Also, in terms of reliability, this also has provided us in replacing the traditional network by putting up these broadbands and SIM cards. So we were not only dependent with one connection, we had multiple connections now. So just in case, well, especially for rural areas where connectivity is really difficult. I mean, you go to some islands where practically there's no network on that end. You only have cell sites, right? So we were able to use that as a leverage to connect those branches to our corporate network as well. So at that perspective, the evolution of SD-WAN has definitely helped the industry, not only large organizations, but especially those small organizations, right? In resolving and connecting all of these small offices, small stores to their corporate network, and thus resolving a lot of issues of inventory shortage and all of these things, right? Getting real in-time information from the stores as well. So these are the things that actually SD-WAN was able to contribute to the technology, to the industries.
Okay, thank you so much, Gabby. And I fully agree with your input about the SD-WAN. It was able to significantly reduce the costs on the company. So yeah, I fully agree with you on that matter. What about Kuldeep? Based on your expertise and experience in the IT infrastructure and cybersecurity space, what are your thoughts and ideas about SD-WAN evolution? Yeah, Kuldeep, sorry to interrupt. I think you are on mute.
Hi. Yeah, so I'm saying I think most of the points have been covered by Vikram and Gabby, but if I just take it on the next level, we should. So cost is definitely one important factor. We're going to talk about that more in this. But from the cybersecurity point of view, all of the organizations, whole world has been moving right now on the cloud first concept. So everyone wants to host their applications over cloud. We've been moving all of our critical applications, even the ERPs, even the SAP applications have been now moving over the cloud. And SD-WAN is actually an answer of that how do you ensure that you have not only a secure access, but also the high performing access in that time. So SD-WAN is a technology which gives a local breakout for a direct access where you can do actually application level performance enhancement and give a much better performance for user to access these applications instead it has been used on the traditional MPLS or fixed line setup in that way. this is one. The other thing what we need to also look in this case is that how do we control the security aspects locally on those sites? Today, in the traditional setup of, again, in the MPLS, we have a centralized security control, and you never know that, what's been happening on the very, very remote sites, which are actually part of the corporate network, but might not have the control kind you have generally on the data centers or big branch offices or in the head offices type of environment. I think the SD-WAN is again answer for that, where the complete control lies there. In case of any risk comes, it does not been there for the whole organization. It's been very, very isolated and comes with a good visibility overall. So it makes a lot of difference. Also, we need to see one important thing is that in today's time, when the digital transformation is primary agenda for any corporate organization, SD-WAN gives a lot of flexibility. So we discussed about the cost, but we should also see the time. The SD-WAN is something which actually saves a lot of time for corporates in today's time. Being dependent on a specific partner, following the timelines for them, regulating for a lot of things. What do you need? You need just any kind of trusted internet for that, and you can actually enable it as far as you have a technology and you have the standards agreed on this. If that is there, so setting up a new branch, a new connections for any organization in today's cutthroat competition actually makes it more important for us. It really saves a lot of time. And the network was always considered as one of the stereotype in terms of very rigid, very fixed, takes a lot of time, no visibilities and all. Network has also been moving on the dynamic network and the same easy setup kind of thing. Why do we need high skilled engineers to do the network, whereas it can be actually done even remotely, and SD-WAN is helping on that all put together. So I think with that, I would say the world is already moving. Most of the organization has been already accepted and adopted, and whoever is not will surely very soon realize the benefits and move on that. And that's the way world will work. In today's time, when we have disruption because of the pandemic, these are the technologies which actually enables us to work from anywhere, work from any time, with all security, with all proper access, and without any limitations of what we have traditionally seen on this. So that way, I think SD-WAN is definitely an answer for both from performance, for cost, as well as security point of view. Yeah.
Fully agree. And based on what you gentlemen just mentioned, it is pretty much obvious to everyone. SD-WAN is really a game changer. But yeah, Kuldeep, since you already mentioned about the SD-WAN security, why don't we talk about SD-WAN security? What are your thoughts, Kuldeep, about or thoughts or views on building blocks for convergence on networking and security, which is also related to SD-WAN?
Oh yes. So see, as I said that the controls what you always want on the security, the visibility what you want on the security, and most importantly, the alerts what you want on the security. It's always great when you do it on the local level instead of doing it on a centralization level at that time, because the reach, as I said, the access, especially see, I come from a manufacturing organization, and we have many of our branches. We have hardly 2 to 3 or maybe max 5 support users, system users have been sitting on a very remote areas, but we need to give them an access of our internal network. Now, how do I ensure there is no unauthorized accesses being happening knowingly or unknowingly by these users? So there is a solution when I have a local breakout. As I said, number one, I'm been fully isolating a specific issue on a specific site. I'm not putting the whole business on risk. And number two, the visibility what you get. So you have local firewalls. What do you put it in this way? You don't need to have a separate firewall, a separate routing engines, or a separate the processing engines or the monitoring systems and all. Most of the partners, most of the OEMs has been right now offering this branch in a box kind of concept, where you get all of these services part of one simple solution. And the good thing here is that there are a lot of partners available. They offer it also as a soft service. They don't want to sell really on the appliances. So that answers is saying, you really put all the firewall specific policies on site wise. There might be some very critical sites where you can actually tweak and make it more strong. There might be some site where you want to have a relaxation because those have got much more access. You can do that. In the traditional setup, you can't because you have a centralized policy at the time, and there's a lot of complexity. So security-wise, I personally feel that having this decentralized approach is being much better than the centralized approach what we have done. And most importantly is the control, the visibility, the reports, what you anytime can generate. Today, when anybody's been running with the security operations centers, the challenge what was faced earlier is that, while you get an alert, you're quite dependent on the network reports, which IP has been using it, from where the alert has come. Because of DHCP and other problems, the IP would have been changed, though there are solutions available. But everything comes with a cost. Everything comes with a huge cost. You have that capability, you don't have capability. It all makes a lot of difference. This very particular technology actually saves not only your bandwidth cost, but also saves a lot of potential costs which were earlier proposed in that way. So we can isolate, we can always zero down. Is saying there is any kind of threat is being identified or detected, you can always figure out, is saying, respective location, respective user is actually being compromised on the specific attack, and you can do the next actions, whatever has been there. So that's much, as I said, fast tracking the identification, limiting the exposure to not have the whole business exposed on any kind of risk, and most importantly, another thing in terms of the cloud also. So today's time when all the applications are hosting over the cloud, you need to also ensure that while performance is important, security is important. How do you secure it locally? And there is what the local control makes sense. So if you go for all in all actions, there's no limit. It's just that, very importantly, both SD-WAN and SASE makes huge difference in this case.
Yeah, totally makes sense, Kuldeep. Thank you so much. So Vikram, based on your experience, what are your thoughts about SD-WAN security? Yeah, I think, sorry to interrupt. I think
sorry. That's a topic we can talk about all day long, right? It's a very interesting topic on SD-LAN and security. So I'm trying to figure out where to start with this interesting part. So security by default is, like I mentioned earlier, is part of security by design. It has to be built into the SD-WAN architecture. You cannot define security once SD-WAN is in. So a security has to be part and parcel of the whole planning of the SD-WAN. It is basically, it has to be leveraged properly, and it has to be enforced also. I mean, we see multiple areas where, we implement or we design security, but it's not enforced. We need to make sure that we have the right network connections, we have the right business continuity in place for this, and also to ensure that the secure network is accessible to all businesses to deliver the applications, the deliverables they need to deliver. In multiple areas, I have seen in past few years is in a rush to implement SD-WAN, to be the first in the industry to be pioneer in having SD-WAN, people compromise on security, and that is not a right thing. It has to be, let's not rush into being the first one. This is not a sprint, it's a marathon. We need to run it as a marathon and make sure we take every aspect of it into consideration before doing it. The SD-WAN would replace the legacy network infrastructure, and that would be the challenge, the part of it. And it would basically replace it with a more modular, more state-of-the-art technology, and resulting in a continued business continuity anytime, anywhere. There should also be a centralized management of infrastructure security and centralized security monitoring. Considering that it is a security solution kind of a thing, we need to have a right kind of monitoring and right kind of alerts which can be monitored and be more proactive than be reactive, right? And which would result in timely identification and containment of any infections or attacks from rogue actors. And of course, it will also help us in making sure that we have an improvement in the asset management in the company, which is an important part of the SD-WAN layout, so that we have visibility into what is there in our network, to be able to make sure that we address any shadow IT, unaccounted for IT, or local IT, which is not monitored, or which is a server sitting under somebody's desk and nobody's aware of, is taken care of. So these are the kind of areas which we need to factor in when looking at security and SD-WAN.
Okay, thank you so much. And I fully agree, Vikram, with your input that security should be part of the overall plan in terms of implementing SD-WAN in any organization. What about you, Gabby, based on what you have mentioned a while ago when you started adapting SD-WAN for your remote offices? What are your thoughts or ideas about security related to SD-WAN infrastructure?
Let me put it this way: there's no one box that fits everything, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So there's actually pros and cons that you need to really assess and really determine what your requirements are. A lot of that one would entail several risks, but the question is, how do you mitigate those risks, right? Well, obviously, when you start migrating to broadband technologies, you start exposing yourselves to your network to other possibilities, no? Especially when you're using internet-based connections, right? So, of course, that's a risk that should be addressed while you're designing the whole architectural design. Before deciding into going to SD-WAN. That is something that is very important and should be addressed by day one by the team before you decide in going to even developing the TOR or the terms of reference, right?
Yeah.
Before you go to even start evaluating other products. Based on our evaluation, not all products would offer the same right technology in terms of security. Okay. Of course, the higher brands would be more expensive, but offer a more secured way of controlling your network. And the lower brand, I wouldn't say the lower brands, but the cheaper brands basically would have the less network, I would say. But I guess at the end of the day, this is how it's a matter of how you mitigate those risks. If you're looking into acquiring a low-cost SD-WAN would have the basic features that you're actually looking for, then you have to mitigate that by putting it into a firewall or something like a firewall in it, right, on the back of it. So, but there are certain when we're doing the evaluation, there were certain technologies as well that were already incorporated on the security side. I guess these are all things that has to be reassessed, evaluated properly before you actually start putting yourself into that SD-WAN technology that you plan to implement.
Okay, awesome. It's really such a wonderful discussion. Now let's talk about best practices or any recommendations on your end, gentlemen, or any key takeaways for the audiences about SD-WAN. What are your recommendations? What are your suggestions in terms of best practices to any organization who are planning in adapting or implementing SD-WAN to their network? Why don't we start with Kuldeep?
Okay. So to be honest, even I am discovering still what are the best practices have been there for that, and there's no end for it, because this is surely been coming up as a big bang in what to adopt. But whatever I have learned so far, I think one of the most important thing here is that how do we choose the SD-WAN technologies? Because right now there are multiple technologies available. You know, every second OEM has been offering this as a service. What has been important for us to see that which has been really relevant to our business. You know, everyone has a different business, and the different offerings have been there. So So how do we want to do it? What kind of dependency we want to create at the time, which is actually should not be in SD-WAN case. Well, number one. Number two, what I feel is as a best practice is that when we implement this, we should definitely take an advantage of that. SD-WAN should not just replace with one set of network connectivity as the another set of network connectivity. It comes with huge advantages, as we discussed earlier. So, the benefits what people offer is that it's reducing the complexity, reducing the cost. So there should be a definite challenges is saying how this has been reducing my cost, how this has been reducing my complexity. I think that's a very important thing before we start any kind of rollout or the adoption on that. Third and important thing, I think there are benefits in terms of security. We discussed is saying it gives the more secure remote and mobile access. This gives restricted access for the user's device and application. So that should be adopted. That should be actually implemented. Buying a technology is an easiest thing. How do you really use it? Take an advantage of that is most important on that. And I think the again, what we should never ever come in a trap is that ultimately SD-WAN gives you a freedom on certain things, on certain restrictions, certain the bandwidth partners, the OEM partners, and all. We should always challenge is saying why will we be still occupying or will be kind of stuck with a specific bandwidth partner on that. So I think challenging and demanding the benefits is very important as a best practice in this. The other thing is, as I said, is taking all the advantages. And third and most important, I think we should, as a report, it's very important to keep reviewing is saying, are we really achieving the secure results on that? What we don't want, the least you want is that, you've been actually exposing your network more than what it was there earlier. So it's very, very important to keep maintaining, keep tuning the whole setup, keep changing the setup in case there is any specific ask on that. So we can't just implement and leave it like that. There is a proper maintenance has been required in this thing, which is the real benefits to be taken up. So that's the specific benefits comes in my mind, and then the best practices.
Okay, thank you so much, Kuldeep. Why don't we proceed with Vikram? Vikram, any key takeaways for the audiences about the SD-WAN infrastructure best practices?
I think there'll be a repeat of what everybody has said, and what I have said in the past is the best practices is that first of all, make sure that be secure. That is the most important thing you can think of. Yeah. Be secure, have an alternate plan in place, have a, we are so used to the traditional WAN that the new technology is sometimes it's a bane to have the new technology. We need to make sure that our infrastructure, our architecture is set to take the benefits of SD-WAN. You should not put SD-WAN in to basically say that we have it in. It should basically be for making sure that we get the most benefit out of it. We basically ensure that every angle of the SD-LAN deployment is used by our applications, by our network, by our infrastructure, and above all by our users to enhance the business, to make it more secure, more safe for users, and also while providing the benefits of SD-WAN. We are basically, we look at the business intent should be clear on what exactly they want from the SD-WAN. They should basically know that this is what SD-WAN can do, and it's not, and every business does not need to jump on the SD-WAN bandwagon. There might be businesses who are perfectly fine doing the current way of working, and they don't have to because everybody else is doing it. We should also do it. It's not a cheap solution, like Kuldeep said. Money is a factor, and it goes without saying that SD-WAN can make real-time changes to all our routing and application. And it's a ease of management also for our security staff or IT staff within corporations. So keep that in mind that it will make life easy. But before we get to the end of making life easy, we will have to go through a number of loopholes and everything to make it happen.
Yeah, thank you so much, Vikram. What about you, Gabby? What are your recommendations or suggestions to corporations who are planning on adapting SD-WAN for their organizations?
Well, it all boiled down into strategy actually.
Mhm.
At the end of the day, it's your end state. What's your end state? Okay, what's your objective? Is your objectives is your objective defined by cost? Is it basically defined by improving efficiency in terms of connectivity? Are you moving to the cloud? Are from a traditional network? Are your organization moving to the cloud? These are all the things that the SD-WAN can actually provide if you adopt to that technology. So I guess at the end of the day, it's how you plan it. You have to really plan it properly. What applications that you can actually migrate to the cloud, that you can redirect those routes from those branches going to that internet connection, going to those applications. So it's a matter of really planning it properly, uh, and taking consideration of a lot of things. Of course, primary consideration will be security as well, right? You don't want to come to a point that you implemented SD-WAN and you don't have the appropriate security that would basically mess up the entire applications and your systems, right? So that's something that has to be really looked into very well, whether you have enough security that can support the SD-WAN, or will the SD-WAN itself be sufficient enough in providing the security that you need. That's the primary thing that has to be looked into. Uh, Other basically is cost. A lot of organizations right now are more into cost reduction. Well, technically, right? From
Yeah.
from the day that I started working as an IT person, every year it's how do you reduce costs? How do you reduce costs? How do you reduce costs? Right? It's a matter. SD-WAN would definitely, when we did the study, it actually reduces 40% of the total operational expenses in terms of network infrastructure. So that's a huge amount of money, right? But of course, you have to leverage. You have to take into considering what are you sacrificing in adopting the SD-WAN technology. You have to take into consideration of that one. And of course, at the end of the day, management has to be involved in deciding this as well. It is not a one-man team that basically decide that we have to migrate to SD-WAN, right? So because there are definitely risks and exposures in adopting an SD-WAN technology as well. So all of these things has to lay down, has to be presented properly before you could actually decide whether an SD-WAN technology would really help your organization.
Okay, thank you so much, Gabby, for your wonderful inputs on the matter. It's also obvious to everyone, SD-WAN is significantly evolving up until now. So I also agree with Kuldeep about planning it ahead of time, and also with Vikram's input about planning security with implementing SD-WAN. Security is also an important aspect before we start implementing anything to our network or to our organization. But I think all of us would agree that the business value of implementing SD-WAN, of course, is to improve our technological performances within the organization. Yeah, that's part of it. At the same time, if we can plan implementing security from day one, it can boost our security posture as well, lowers complexity, and of course reduce costs. So yeah, it's such a wonderful discussion with all of you gentlemen. It's really a pleasure having this panel discussion with you, Vikram, Gabby, and Kuldeep. Thank you so much. Back to you, Vavana.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Renne, for that wonderful moderation on the first panel discussion at our inaugural edition of the World SD-WAN and SASE Summit. I'd like to humbly thank once again